Welcome to AEF TV in association with Anjurati. I'm now joined by Kieran, who's the President and CEO of CPCS. And Peter, firstly, thank you for making the time to be here. A busy schedule over the 3-day show. And we were talking a little bit off air about your advisory role within Nigeria in terms of the sale of the public utilities there and things like that, which I know has been a discussion point here at this conference. And I suppose if I put you on the spot a little bit, you're best placed to give us a bit of an update with what's going on and then maybe some of the challenges that you had in getting to where you are now.
Okay, yeah. Sure. We're a little past the midway point. There were two quite distinct sets of assets in this restructuring and reformation of the industry. And the first step, which really began some 6 or 7 years ago, was the unbundling and with the intention of getting private investment into the existing monopoly integrated utility. And the government of Nigeria passed legislation, I think, in 2005, and tried unsuccessfully with World Bank assistance. And then after the government came into power, sort of got back to it fairly seriously. So they broke the utility up into 18 separate companies, 11 distribution companies, the transmission system, which is one system, and then 6 generating companies. And the plan was to sell, was to keep the concession, the transmission company, and operate that under a management contract, and then sell all of the other assets. The 2 of the generating companies were hydro, and those were a long-term concessions. And that process has been going well. We started 2 years ago with sort of going out to investors, and the bidding was last year. The preferred bidders were announced early in this calendar year. We signed all of the agreements with 15 companies and in February, and very shortly afterwards they made their down payments. They were required to put 25% of their price down, which they all did.
Right.
And they have 6 months to reach financial closure. So that will be, we expect before the end of August, that those companies will all be transferred over to the private sector.
And those companies are the investment and the running is coming from sort of mainly foreign entities, or is there sort of local involvement in the whole thing as well?
It's quite a bit. It's quite a mixture. There's a lot of local involvement, but the local capacity in terms of technical operation of the plants is not there. And we also asked the bidding groups to have substantial corporate experience, which they could either bring in themselves through their equity partners, or if they didn't have an equity partner, then they could enter into a long-term technical services agreement with another utility. And it's about half-half went that technical services route, and that was a very good vehicle for Nigerian investors. And in the majority, more than a majority of cases, there's substantial financial participation by Nigerians.
Right, and that's always healthy, because you're trying to create something sustainable locally as well, and things like that. But the whole process, in doing all of this, I would imagine that the outcome, or the desired outcome, is increased efficiency and better delivery, and less blackouts or whatever,
Exactly.
Whatever the measure is. So how robust are those success matrices in there, and what is the vision in terms of, because you've got to give this time to bed in. You can't suddenly say, hey, it's private now, therefore it's better, like digitally, like
correct,
overnight.
Yes.
What's the bedding in time frame, do you think?
Well, it'll take, each of the bidders had to prepare a detailed business plan, and that was part of the evaluation, and provide us with their full staffing plan, and the general manager and the person who was going to be in charge of different technical operations and finance and so on. So they're coming in with teams and plans, and they'll move pretty quickly. But on day one, there's not going to be a single extra megawatt.
Sure.
The biggest change will probably happen in the distribution, where there are a lot of illegal connections, most likely corrupt employees who would help people collect illegally and not enforce collections and so on. So we expect to see a big change in the distribution. The generating plants that were sold are mostly old, and
so a lot of inward.
There'll be new investment. Exactly,
Yeah,
there'll be new investment coming. They're all sold completely debt free, so that basically the new owners can start right away to make investments.
And that debt has been written off by the Nigerian government, or
exactly.
Well,
yes, it was parked in a separate company. Yeah.
Okay, and we were also talking off air about you saying that actually this sort of thing needs to happen in more countries in Africa, and it's something that many of the other interviewers have said as well, that look, we can't reach the goals we want for electrification or power supply or whatever it is if we don't get that inward investment and create a framework for that inward investment. What do you think are the sort of key things that either governments or regulators need to do two things? One, create the environment to have that, and also based on your experience in Nigeria, it's just like what are some of the frameworks to look out for? I know we can't talk too close because every country will have specific issues, but what are the sort of bigger trends you're seeing in there?
Well, I think we have to remember that at independence, most of these countries did what everybody was doing in the world, which was to create this government-owned integrated monopoly, and that was thought to be a lot easier, and the generating, it was sort of, some countries still talk about the need for coordination because they don't really trust the market to be able to coordinate consumption and production. But the minute you start to want private investment, both as a source of capital, but also increasingly as a source of efficiency, then it requires regulation, independent regulation. It requires much more detailed and well thought through back-to-back contracts, all the way from the provision of the feedstock, if it's oil or gas, all the way through transportation and so on.
Because you need that stability in the supply chain, don't you?
Exactly, and when it's all integrated, they don't think about those things very much. They produce power and they sell it, and they're not sure what it costs very often. And that's the other big element is the tariffs. Are the tariffs adequate? And one of the reasons for the problems of the public utilities is frankly that the government has forced the tariff low, or kept it very low in spite of increasing costs. And
from a political will standpoint, we don't,
exactly.
I don't want to put the prices up because
it's not good for
that's
voters.
That's not going to get me re-elected.
Exactly,
right.
Very much so, yeah. Whereas a subsidy or an inefficient utility is something that's not visible for a while. And even, countries that are a lot further along, South Africa had very similar problems where they really neglected expansion of the system and reinvestment. So those are the big things, therefore, really that are needed to go along with the unbundling and the attracting the private sector is a stable, long-term regulatory framework, and then a tariff that provides a tariff at the far end that the consumers pay, that provides enough cash all the way through the system.
So now, how do you think we can reconcile this? Because I'm one of those magpies. I read a lot, and you take all of this in, and you see. My favorite magazine is The Economist because I love their journalism, and to me, there seems to be a very key issue within Africa and India and other sort of developed rural economies where a large chunk of your population, let's say, is poor, and how can that population afford more you would call market rate tariffs. And how do you reconcile that when, let's say, 80% of your constituency forms that socio-dynamic, and then you have something else? What are the models you're seeing that seek to create that balance or resolve that balance?
Look, well, the big issue is less, I think, the actual tariff, because if someone is, wants to operate a sewing machine or a few light bulbs so that the kids can study at night, do their homework, that's the cost is not very high, and they aren't running air conditioners or things like that.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
But the big cost is actually the capital cost of getting the power to them, and the costs once you get into rural areas and a lower density population, the costs per user, and then you have users using very little electricity, so that capital cost goes way up. So the governments can and do subsidize. In fact, most have a tariff that's lower for the first tranche of use, and that's subsidized, and that subsidy is absorbed by the rest of the system without much problem in a lot of countries, and many countries have been very successful at doing that. Countries like Jamaica have 100% connection now. The cost to actually extend the grid into rural areas and into smaller communities is more difficult in some cases. In Jamaica, in fact, what they have done there is essentially instead of reducing the tariff, they keep the tariff the same, but the extra part, if you like, from what they could have done goes back to repaying those capital costs. So instead of asking people, give us $1,000 and we'll connect you, which would never happen, they'll say, okay, well, we'll add that $1,000 over your power bill for the next 10 years and get it back. So. And that's worked well.
Bit like the phone model we have in the UK. You can have this expensive handset, but you got to sign up for.
You sign up for 3 years. That's right, and then you get a free.
Exactly, system, it's free. Yeah. No, it's not.
just try to leave after 1 year. You'll find out how free it was. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So unfortunately, we're kind of getting to the end of our time here. I wish we had more time to discuss some of these issues, but it's a bit of a taste. A final question, just before we go to you, is I had another gentleman talk to me about in the rural area that actually one of the real potentials is to create a sort of local generation capacity. Where the point you made. I just want the light on for a bit longer so the kids can do the homework, or it's that type of consumption. Do you see a big sort of potential of that? And I know it's starting to happen, but I suppose the question I'm asking is could it happen a bit faster, and could that be a real part of the generation mix for these sort of areas?
I think it can. I mean, the first thing is for the government to really say, look, we allow it, first of all, because normally the legislation says you can't do that.
Can't do
the
that.
Government is, so to allow it and then to encourage it, because some operations, I mean, even if it's diesel generators, are going to be quite expensive, but the availability of small bits of power can be quite transforming in terms of the rural economy, and with solar. Also, its ability, if there's some storage to go with it, then it also provides power that's very dispersed. And the unit cost, for big generation, there's a substantial scale effect. But for solar, the scale effect is not very large, so you can have dispersed power.
And that's enough to charge the phone, because someone else was saying a lot of economics is done through the phone, as well. So I just need to make sure that that's charged.
And you find in villages that you would totally unexpected. You'll find somebody with a small generator right now who runs the business charging
people phone. That's just wonderful. I love that. So sorry, we've come to the end of our time. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. And thank you as well for watching. I hope that's given you some insight to the conversations that have been happening here. So this interview and other interviews are available on Engerati and the AEF website, as well as EnergyNet. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.